Dreamcatcher app.
Live streaming is on.
So yeah, that's what I was hoping to go over. What's on your list from your side?
Nothing right now. I mean, I'm deep in it.
Deep.
Yeah, I'll be up for air in a little bit, but
Okay.
I know I respect okay, having seen it a little bit from the other side, when you watch people go deep and they're going in the wrong direction and you're like, come up for air sooner, just try to think about what it looks like from the outside a little bit more. I know how frustrating it is when somebody is deep into things,
Is there anything I can save you a lot of harassment or any harassment if I see commits? I can look at them and be like, is that right? Is that not right? Or he might be hitting that same problem that I tried to steer away from because of these other things.
Yeah. The intent is to work out in the open, as soon as possible. I'm just because so much of it right now is backgrounding. I just felt embarrassed, but I know I shouldn't. I won't. Okay.
Don't feel embarrassed. I mean, look, I just put the entire code base up. There's holes aplenty in that. So, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing I can help you with I-21, can I crack on with the foam stuff?
Yeah, love to.
All right. So
I don't know what you're at, but it looks like I love graph visualizations. I try to push them on everyone all the time.
Yeah, I know. So org mode has a good rep. People think it's how God designed the universe and blah blah blah, whatever. But the original system that it sort of tries to emulate is called a Zettelkasten, which is from I think the 1800s.
Okay.
Which is basically a knowledge graph and a system that supports knowledge graph operations for humans. So the original Zettelkasten was, sue me if I'm saying it wrong. I've only ever read that word because I don't have any friends that I can talk to about Zettelkastens, but which seems weird in a system that's built for knowledge sharing and connectivity. But we'll get to that as a separate issue. The basic theme is the fact that knowledge in the world has this graph-like structure, whereas everything we try to use generally has a catalog or a linear sequence of things.
Yeah.
And it causes a lot of problems when it comes to recall, or people who have a lot of loose ideas struggle with a system that requires full and complete ideas. So where am I going with that?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the brain mouth problem.
Yeah.
Your words are a straight line, but your brain is a blob, right?
Well, it's more like an exploding blob. It doesn't completely finish its explosions before jumping on to the next one. And what are you going to do? Tell it to stop? They're like, I need you to keep going, but I just need a moment to catch up. And then I stop, and then something else happens. And it's like, how is this machine supposed to work? So how I'd always thought of the Dreamcatcher was a big fat graph that anyone anywhere could contribute to. It came with native promises about things like proof of existence, proof of I had this idea first, proof of I got this idea from someone for you to actually give attribution to, and all of that without you thinking. You're just spewing into this machine. And then the idea was that somewhere in there was some good stuff, and if you built a system and connected people up with that system, the ultimate would be that you could just say a good idea, come back 2 years later, and there's a product. It's sort of the where we want to get to, right? Because there's so most people who have good ideas will maybe only get to act on 1% of them, and the rest will be wasted, and the oceans will boil, the rivers will run dry, and we'll have all missed out. So, let's we need to catch it. We need to catch a lot more of that, I think, to survive. The Dreamcatcher was about that, as well as overcoming the political hurdles of like, how much should I get paid? How much should I offer? Who owns this idea? And all those kinds of problems all rolled into one. And you're like, here's the Dreamcatcher. Just can we get on with it? So, long-winded way to say that Scott and I made a paper-based version of the Dreamcatcher pool concept, which was a narrow application of the Dreamcatcher in terms of funding, because funding need not have that wild, explosive graph-like property, because funding is typically warrants a lot more consideration and can be linearized a lot better than pure knowledge. But even with that system, we still had this problem that the original source of ideas, the dust cloud of ideas, unorganized, hard to track, where if you add them in a linear sense like we were to the pool, they got out of hand real quick, and it just hides the value, I guess.
Right.
I got two more things that seem disconnected that I want to walk through, and then I'll wrap the whole lot up.
Sure.
So at the same time, as long as we've been working on Interpulse, it has always been a large cloud of ideas. I feel I've always been able to answer the majority of questions when asked, but I've never been able to write them down before they were asked, because a lot of the time I got to think about the answer. It's obvious from what I've already got. Not obvious that it's even a question to be answered at first.
Yeah, so questions speak more to the person asking them sometimes, right?
Yeah. And given that one of our design goals, well, it's not even a design goal. It's like we hit on this thing that we're like, well, if you look at TCP/IP, it's kind of minimal. Like, given the way math works and the way transmission works, you don't have a lot of options other than to make TCP the way it is, and we, I don't know what the name for that is, but we have always strived to be that in the blockchain space. It's like we are more a deduction than we are an artistic expression. Yeah. And that has a bunch of problems that come with it. One of which is an inability to predict the time. But one of the big benefits is that the amount of knowledge required to communicate the concept is a lot less if you're not one of those people that needs to have it all written down first. Like, if you get the model and the concept, you can know with some certainty that you're giving the same answer back to a question as what anyone else who sees the same model would. I think. I hope.
It's like the original semantic web idea, right? It's like not just like nodes and vertices, right? But also like layers of meaning on top of it, where like you can infer different relationships between things by like how their meanings connect. Like this is what I like about this. Like, if I think you're going where I think you're going, I should just listen. I should stop. I always just talk. I should stop talking. I should just listen.
No, that's good. It's good. It helps me. And like, I mean, I'm trying to paint something that's fuzzy on a good day. So,
a graph has the nice advantage of the fact that like almost anyone can look at a graph and understand what they're looking at, right?
Yeah.
if you kind of think about what TCP/IP is, or like any kind of thing that's been built as an overlay network on top, it's like, you know, a lot of these are just ad hoc structures that you threw in that kind of like node and vertex kind of, or sorry, vertex and edge kind of construction of a graph, right? Like, I think about a Wikipedia as an example. Like a page is just a bunch of text. You can like bracket a word to like imply that like that connects to another node somewhere, and then somebody else can come and fill that node out. And like a lot of that activity is like just ad hoc human activity, right? There's nothing like particularly machine readable about it. There's nothing semantic in the sense that like this relationship is rich. Like there's a lot of kind of context and metadata to it.
Right. Yep.
You know, the idea that like the original when Web3 used to be about like semantic graph overlays of information, like the original idea there was
the original proposal for the next web
didn't
have a cryptocurrency in it.
Right. It was about making meaning more machine readable, right? It was about like when things have connections, it's not just simply like I can connect to this thing with a hyperlink. It's like I can connect to this thing with like some kind of understanding or meaning, right? And like when a computer can follow that, that means the computer has some like better chance of actually understanding things the way that we understand them.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all the same sort of thing. I mean, we transitioned from hey, let's build a blockchain to hey, let's build a knowledge graph that is multiverse capable.
Yeah.
Now, one of the biggest flaws we attack in our system is the notion that there is only one correct view. And this one correct view is a very hard thing to even notice that you have in your system, because it is the system in a lot of ways. And the notion that there were parallel possible systems, depending on the wishes of your users, is not even comprehensible or articulatable in a Web 2.0 architecture design.
Right.
It's like, no, there's one database. This database is replicated. You know, the concept of divergence it's like the enemy, like something bad has happened and we need to restore. We've lost control. A hacker came in and expressed an alternate view, like this is bad. So, we got that kind of a requirement going on too. And the knowledge graph of Interpulse itself is large, getting larger, and we have an increasingly apparent need to be able to express it to more people than just us. We focused intensely on it for many years. Still, we are fuzzy on some areas. We need a way to make tracks that are followable by other people. Now, this may be news to you because I don't know how you'd know it. But every day when I'm trying to figure things out with Interpulse or with the Dreamcatcher or with anything else, I make little notes in an Emacs org node document. And I have kept, I think that I can faithfully say that every new idea I've ever had since I was approximately 22 has been written down in a text document. And it's big, like I have to purge it periodically. Like right now when I open up Emacs and tell it to load these files into agenda mode, I'm waiting, like for a good long while. Like it periodically needs to be purged. And my point is, where I'm personally trying to get to is that I can work like that in the Dreamcatcher and all those notes are immediately published. They serve They serve no one by being private. I sometimes look back on them, I reach conclusions, and then I close the note and it never gets looked at. What I'm trying to do is I've found foam, which is sort of like how I see the Dreamcatcher app being, and it's certainly a great starting point. And so I've started to try and use that as my daily driver or inventor's notebook. And I started writing down things in there, and I'm hoping you can take a look at them and tell me if they sort of make sense, like if they can be followed or anything like that. And what I'd hope is that you could start using that system with me too, because you expressed the requirement to have a bit more documentation.
Yeah.
And to be notified when a impactful decision was being pondered or was coming down the pipe. And to understand more about the key concepts of interpols. So
I love this. Where did you find this? This is awesome.
It's weird where I found it. Initially, like, I knew about Rome research and I knew about the Zettelkasten because I'd been reading about org mode. And if you read about org mode enough, you come across the Zettelkasten, and then Rome research pops up and you're like, that looks cool, but blah, blah, blah. And there's all these issues. And then I was reading a article that someone had wrote called TOSSA, TOSSA, which was this metric that they'd cooked up called time till open source alternative. And they had gone through a large number of commercial products and mapped out the time it took for an open source alternative to appear. And they were pushing the concept that TOSSA was going down and getting shorter and shorter. And one of the shortest TOSSAs they could find was foam, where it was an alternative to Rome. And then I was like, oh, I took a look, and then here we are. So very indirect, accidental, whatever, but that is the type of connection that we want to get out of the Dreamcatcher, where you're sort of poking around and the graph lights up in an area that you're interested in to show you nearby things that you would have otherwise just browsed on past.
I want to start by saying I love that. I love the idea. I love I also love the fact that, like, thinking about what is the interaction pattern with the system before building the system means it's just going to have a lot more answers, like, as you build it. Like, it's going to clear some of the UX difficulties.
Yeah, this immediately hits a lot of the UX problems that we're going to have, particularly when, like, the number of notes gets large and you're like, I feel like I'm sitting in the great plastic patch in the ocean right now. How do we?
The one thing that, like, I kind of always wondered about when trying to think it through like this is, how do you know who your neighbors are? Like, I know there's one very clear way, which is, like, if I am reading something and I'm inspired by it and I make something based on that inspiration, like, that should be tracked as, like, part of the attribution. That should be tracked as part of the, like, that should be tracked as a type of neighbor, right? But there's, like,
yeah,
like, I don't know if that's connected enough. I don't know if that's, like, dense enough to be, like, useful, right? If you take my meaning, like, I think there's also a bunch of other types of. Yeah,
I'd say that the solution to your problem is not a singular answer. The solution is a framework upon which the meaning of closeness can be experimented upon through the deployment of different algorithms. Now,
all right, so maybe you identify what you think it's close to, and other people identify what they think it's close to.
No, it's identifying what close means. not like requiring a statement of closeness, but a calculation of closeness. For example, the Conway maneuver, like what I tried to pull at by having a separate core team from the app team. Spectacular fail, but the reverse Conway maneuver is sort of, people talk about it and they do it and all that. Conway himself sort of says, well, Conway's law is basically a warning about the connections that didn't come to exist that should have existed between people that would have resulted in a better outcome for all if those connections had been identified, permitted, strengthened, incentivized, all that.
Right. Okay. I get your meaning. So like this is the problem of the Dreamcatcher.
It is one of the problems, but it is not required to be solved. The Dreamcatcher, if you pardon how fluffy an expression this is, the Dreamcatcher is not a finished product. The Dreamcatcher is a journey towards something. And the working Dreamcatcher need only function enough to move forwards at a greater pace than what humans were able to do without it. That's all. And then it uses itself to find better ways to make itself work. Now, we are seeing the beginnings or the tip of the iceberg of an explosion in practical, usable AI type of tools.
Yeah.
Like this art. I love this art. What can I do with it? Makes me smile. Is that worth something? Yeah, sure. But it's what's coming that's sort of more important to be ready for. And having a standardized system where we can all put our data in the same way, run a different AI on it, and get a different picture returned back. That's the piece that we have to build. We don't have to know how to build the thing that interprets it, but we do know that there's a minimum amount of data and structure and some rules in the system that we have to enshrine.
Right.
Like self-sovereignty, like cryptographic keys holding data, like crash recoverability where you're recovering 10 years after the crash. Those types of properties are what we have to do whilst getting out of the way to allow the widest possible range of expression to occur on top of that unarguable foundation. So
yeah, how do you add stuff to this?
Have you pulled down the repo into your local machine?
No. You know what? Like I'm already being sold, to be honest.
Great. Well, there's a wise man once told me, don't keep selling once it's sold. So let's get on with that. So
yeah, if you keep selling once it's sold, you go backwards, right?
It can only go bad. Now, when you pull down the repo and you open up VS Code, there'll be a collection of recommended extensions to install.
Oh boy.
There's a lot of recommended extensions. Sorry about that. Not me. None of those are me.
Every freaking time, I need to jump around GitHub repos. We can do something more interesting than watching me fail at GitHub, if you want.
I could just talk smack to entertain you as you wade through the joy that is multiple identities online. What it's Foam has what appears to be a very active Discord channel.
Okay.
And when you look at their repositories online, they got a lot of following. So what I'm starting to think about is that if we could, say, build...
Hijack it.
Hey?
Write a new engine underneath of it. Hijack it.
Yeah, does that sound wrong? I mean,
No, it's open source, right?
well, if we're like, hey, here's a online version of Foam that has all these other advantages, and you can just jump in with a web app straight away, and blah blah. Because I don't think the community cares about GitHub.com.
Right.
They care about what it does for them.
Right, which is a good stance because GitHub.com is slowly becoming Microsoft's new way of roping people into Microsoft.
Yeah, which sucks.
Yeah, it's sad, right?
Yeah.
And I'm on GitLab, and it's not good.
Yeah.
GitLab's not good.
So, and the Foam repository has got 12,500 stars. This is popular. So what it sort of got me thinking is that our advertising strategy for the Dreamcatcher may very well be to turn up and build little pieces of thing and then sort of gather momentum that way, because we're like, hey, we think we're better and we built this thing that we think improves your community. Yeah.
Okay, I have it open. Sure. Should I install all the recommended extensions?
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh, look at that.
Because they've got sort of, they've got like a sort of an RFC, they've put out a request for visualization. They have things that look like Dreamcatcher requests that if we provided them a more formal funnel for entering their requests into, things could be better.
So is that the first thing to build then?
Well, certainly in terms of the Dreamcatcher, I mean, we need the Dreamcatcher, and Foam is by far the closest thing I've seen to it that makes me think that is what we want. What I was hoping is that you and I can poke at it a bit, because things that look right on the surface often fall apart in the details, and it could well be that our desires for the Dreamcatcher aren't 100% accurate once we start to use Foam a bit. So I figured, look, it can help us right now because it gives us knowledge graph before we have the working blockchain, and can give us a lot of experience about what we have to build.
Did I do something wrong? For some reason, my VS Code is pink.
Oh, sorry, that was me. It's not. Maybe it is pink. It's not pink on purpose, but I made it that bright color because I have like 5 VS Code windows open, and I kept wanting to find this one, and so you can see.
Great. I didn't know you could do that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I want to use it. I'm going to do it.
Okay. All right. So the main app is if you do Control-Shift-P Foam show graph.
Show graph. Hey. Love it.
Then if you control click on a node, it will open that file.
Why do I never find cool tools like this? Like, I literally needed this thing like a month or two ago to try and explain something to someone. And I started downloading like graph libraries, and then I started trying to write what the graphs look like, and then I got frustrated, and then I just did it as a PowerPoint presentation instead.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what's the nicest way to align the Dreamcatcher methods or protocol with the foam tooling. So I tried to color code it that green was an idea, blue was a definition, like a dictionary definition, and purple was a request. And that was sort of as far as I got.
Yeah. This is going to get big fast, isn't it?
That's the thing. That's the big problem, right? And so knowing how to handle that as part of like, okay, well, you know, we can't make something better than foam until we have an idea of how we're going to handle scale better than foam.
Mm-hmm. What's the directionality of the arrows?
The arrows are links to. So start of arrow links to end of arrow.
Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, browsing around this right now, it feels to me a little bit like the way that the arrows point is from like more fine grained to more coarse grained.
That was how I had designed. That's how I have tried to lay things out. Is that the direction of the arrows points to concept size and architectural level.
Okay.
Arrow always points to higher level. Is how I tried to design it. Doesn't have to be that way. That's just something I tried to put in there.
And do you does it matter? Do you want to try and maintain that kind of?
Yeah, I didn't actually realize that I was doing that until you just pointed it out. But that's how things make sense to me. I mean, if I go in and I look at the top level interpulse object, I would expect that the next level of things should be all about the same concept size. I would not expect to drill right down. You know, I would expect the links to the big chunky things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, immediately you kind of hit into, in my opinion, like the idea that I think this is a multigraph. I think there's more than one type of edge here. Because like I might want to know the neighbors of the chunky things that are similar chunkiness. But like I might also want to know what the top-down execution plan is. Or like the granularity breakdown is a very important thing for like a developer type person to know, because then they can pick like a little piece and build that, right? You know, if they like something really big. So
it's maybe not a different type of edge, that's maybe a different type of canvas, like a timeline where you could lay the graph out based on implementation time. You could say node size represent concept size.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, like without getting lost in the details of it at all, what I mean is I think like a graph is such a like universally powerful data structure. You know, specifically for the reason that like you can always orient yourself inside of a graph, I guess, like in a lot of different ways.
In ways that sitting inside a text document just does not give you.
Mm-hmm. But like I know. So you can probably actually derive timelines from the right type of graph tree kind of view, right? So what I'm thinking is like different edge types would actually give you a lot of power to visualize the space differently. Now, I don't know, does it support multi-graphs? And
Right
am I
now,
just shooting?
no,
No, and am
no,
I
it
just
doesn't.
shooting in an insanely wrong direction? Because like,
I think what you might be meaning is like having different types of edge in your quiver means that you can say that in terms of knowledge, this relates to that. But in terms of implementation, this will happen, and then this happens as a dependency, and then this happens, and blah, 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 like that, right?
yeah, I mean, I don't distinguish so much in my own mind because like, if you look at a plan of implementation, it's basically just another type of knowledge graph. You know, if nothing's actually implemented yet, and like I don't want to focus too hard on implementation, right? It's like, um, you know, some pieces in here are going to have relationships like um, like I guess requires some level of like physical hardware interaction, for example. Um, and like there'll be some pure software pieces and some pure hardware pieces, and like that kind of filtering might be expressed as an edge type as well. Um, I don't think as much because that's more just like how do I kind of that's probably more of a canvas thing, right? Where you drop nodes completely and like don't think about the edges between them. I don't know.
Right. Well, that's like a filter,
Mhm.
a filter plus a canvas rule or
Mhm.
some sort of a layout rule.
Right.
Because, you could say that a Gantt chart was really a graph with
Yeah.
some sort of. Okay, well, this system,
Mhm.
where we need to get to with the Dreamcatcher is
Mhm.
the fact that a node on this graph should be able to be. This is what I was talking about with the sun and the moon as objects. I should be able to, like, if I'm in this graph and I talk about the sun,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be just this abstract concept that I just made a new instance of. That there's, how many times has the word sun appeared in literature? A lot.
Mhm.
Whereas there is only one sun, and there kind of always was. And so when I reference it in this graph, I want to talk to the sun that me and a lot of other like-minded people agreed was the accurate model of the sun. So when I talk about, say, I want a Raspberry Pi, I don't want to talk with just the string Raspberry Pi. I want to be connected to a model of the Raspberry Pi because that helps to open up connections to things that are related but that I didn't know were there, because everyone has a knowledge graph in their head. It's
Mhm.
very, very disconnected at the moment. And there's so much duplication between it all. We're missing out on a lot of connectivity between concepts in people's minds, and we're trying to build a tool that brings that out.
Yeah. Um, right. So, pardon me, kind of asking. I'm sure there are like a lot of insane sounding questions, but like the hardest thing to get right here is like what is an object and what is an edge, right? Because
Yep.
um,
I don't even
like
know how to answer that.
right, but yeah, and I don't think we should right now, right? Like I think like the I think probably the number one thing like the distinctions you've made between requests, ideas, and I can't remember what else you said. Um,
Definitions. So
definition.
basically, like pieces of knowledge that aren't like a request being I want something, an idea being like, hey, maybe it could be this, but a definition is like, it's not an invention or a request, it's a statement sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good kind of type of distinction for colors here. I think that like they're like different pieces of information with different senses, right? Like they're
Hmm.
you know
They can be
they're
categorized quite large because as soon as possible, we want to overlay money on this and be like, here's the graph and here's all the money that have been put against different things that don't exist yet that we want to exist.
right.
Then, here's a bucket, here's a pool around a bunch of them that have met a certain quality standard.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Draw a circle and say like all of those, like that's enough to definitely like add value to the world, basically.
Yeah. Because where I want to be at is to be able to raise some capital so that we can put even more money against these different packets. We need to have a list of packets that we want done. Like, we cannot just be like, we want this Dreamcatcher thing. It's like, we actually need to exercise the tool, define the packets that we're missing, and estimate how much they cost, and then go and raise that amount, as opposed to just some money for some stuff.
Right. Like I just need $100 million and I'm going to deliver like the best tool you've ever seen 16 years from now. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to, just spend $500 a person just building hype, and then everything's going to blow up. And oh man, I don't know. No, I'm sorry. I'm just. This is good. This is really good because like. You know what I like the most about this is like it could actually just be the documentation site. It could actually there's many views on this already that could kind of like bind to traditional sources of information of how people think about this stuff.
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to like. I made a bunch of notes throughout the Interpulse code base. I would like to move them all into this format. And then also bring in the existing dictionary that we have on the website. After I talk to Scott, of course, and bring that in and be like, here's the whole, because this is where we want to be with the Dreamcatcher anyway, but it's just a very crude version of it. I mean, I got it publishing to the web on every commit, and it publishes with a graph. The graph ain't great, but at least it's there. We can build on that. And there's a community of people here that our wishes for the Dreamcatcher overlap a lot with them. They're a great place to start for people who want to go further and be like, well, who wants to actually get commercial here and put in money and receive money and do things for money. Let's make ourselves a home in this system, because clearly what we've got right now sucks.
Like the world is in a profound state of failure of imagination. People don't try to connect on the things that they think and care about at all, right? There's no we have a tool that could be like the world's most coherent and big intentional community, and instead we use it to like sell shit to each other. I mean, I don't know. It's all
kinds of wrong, man, and it got made wrong at the start, but there was no way to know that until it scaled perversely. No one could see how it was going to scale. This is a way with Interpulse and with the attribution systems we've spoken about that hits a lot of Project Xanadu's principles. And, I don't know if you saw Werner Herzog's Lo and Behold documentary about the history of the internet and where it came from.
No, but I'm going to download that right now.
It's pretty good. It's freaky, but it's pretty good. They're talking, showing news articles of people exclaiming that there's 3,000 people on the internet, and that, you know, this is a big number. How are we going to deal with all this and that, you know? And some guy named Dave being like, yeah, there's 2 other Daves on the internet. I know them both. But the main reason I got into that was Project Xanadu came about before the web.
Yeah.
It was a concept for how the web should be structured and how links should work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to be this graph. It is famous as being the world's longest vaporware project. No one ever managed to get it off the ground. But when I read through the 17 principles that they list, I'm like, man, I
did it the other night, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure we talked about an answer to every single one of these. Like,
right?
Yeah.
And to me, I look at that, and I've been reading about Ted Nelson's living circumstances now, the things he's done. I looked at his YouTube clips, and I'm like, if we turned up to this guy with a prototype of the Xanadu system, and we're like, hey, how about, you know, you're 81, sir. Isn't this close enough? Like, do you want to give us your blessing? You know, like, this is...
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, that would be maybe the greatest piece of advertising or endorsement that we could ever hope for, is that the guy that precursed the web, who complains that the web is a degraded ripoff of what he was trying to do, comes along and says, yep, no, here it is. This is the thing. Like, we're set then. And I do not think that that is too grandiose a thing to hope for, because we took a very different route for what we were trying to do, and it just so happens that we hit the things he's been trying to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because, again, like you're saying about there's this really kind of interesting phenomenon in math, that the more generic you get with things, the less possible ways there are to build them. And I think of math as kind of like a very, like, it's kind of like a combination of discovering and building. You build things, and then you figure out, like, that they actually always existed when they're useful enough, and that they're everywhere in all the tools you already use. And, like, in the really, really abstract fields of math, like, people talk in weird alien languages where they all understand each other. Because the thing is, like, once you know 10%, 20% of the language, like, it's impossible to misunderstand somebody, because there's only 1 or 2 things that could actually look like that. And I get the sense when I read, like, a spec list like that's, you know, that's the way it is. Like, there's only so many ways you could actually glue all these ideas together and come up with something that's coherent and still work.
So because we have strove to make the ultimate in generalization, it should be no surprise that we find other people longing to be at the same location, because if you simply start on that quest of most general, then you arrive at talking the same language.
Yeah, and I think that's what I like so much about this foam thing. Like, that's why I'm already on the Discord. That's why I really like the idea, is because it's obviously a bunch of people that are trying to do the same thing, which is, like, get rid of the barrier that, like, dumb words are to their ability to share brains, you know? Share brain
basically is what we all came for. It's like, I want to plug mine in and I share with you, and I really just I don't care about everything else. I just want to get
this, like, speech. Speech is such a low fidelity way to do it.
It's absolutely garbage. Absolute garbage. Okay, so where does that leave us? When you read Project Xanadu, what areas were you concerned that were a deviation from our model?
I don't think there are that many. And to be fair, like, all I did was just kind of dig into the rules and the history, like the Wikipedia page, basically. So I'm no expert.
Well, it sounds like after 60 years, no one else is either. So I don't think that's necessarily a loss. Okay, so
I would say the one that stood out the most to me was 6. Every document can contain links of any type, including virtual copies to any other document in the system accessible to its owner. Like, I don't, it seems like a hyper specific thing that, like, I'm not sure what the intent or impact of transclusions are.
Transclusions, to me, I interpret them as being get diffs.
Right.
And you're just saying that instead of just when you make a new document, you take what you copied and you just assert it as though it was the original thing that you ever did. Right. Git finds where it came from and defines your current statement by a patch to the previous statement.
Yeah.
And I as much as I can read about what Ted Nelson's getting at there, because he talks often about, the meaning of cut and paste was bastardized. And I think that's what he's talking about in number 6.
Right. So let me just repeat back to you what I think you said. Is that okay?
Yep.
And I mean, this is a copy of a copy, so it's probably degrading in quality. But there's this idea of call by value, call by reference. How much do you want the data to be a part of the function you're trying to perform right now? Do you want to affect the source, or do you want to look at the source, copy it, and
right? So his notion is always call by reference.
Okay.
Where reference is immutable.
Right. So copy and paste in this world is you literally cannot repeat the bits of somebody else's thing on your RAM. You can only dive into it and then make non-destructive edits to it in your own kind of.
You can define a transform on it, but you must keep the reference to the original that you mutated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm 100% down with that. There's no growth except for by reference. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So does it sound like a crazy idea to try and make to reach out to this guy with just an email being like, look, here's what we think about what you're trying to do, and then maybe work towards building a simple prototype or something to prove it to them? Do you think that is that a good use of time? I guess.
Gather the freaks. I love it. If the guy is still active and you think he'd be
very active. Yeah, he's very active, and he's very, very bent on getting this concept of his realized before he dies. Right. He's 81.
I would say what we should do is we should make sure that we have an answer, a very concrete answer to each of those 17 points in terms of what we intend to build. So if you use that as a roadmap, and then you link the objects off of each point that are kind of related to that point. So this is actually almost like a template for how we could build out a plan using the foam thing.
Yeah. The thing is, there's some core concepts that we'd want to upend of his and offer our extensions on. He uses the word server a lot.
Right.
I think that for us, server means pulse chain or pulse complex. Mm-hmm. And it never... I'm starting to think that a way to explain what we're doing is that we allow the server to be transmitted as well as the data, whereas the normal models make the servers immovable,
mm-hmm.
whereas we made these highly mobile servers that can be in multiple places at once.
Mm-hmm. It's a virtual server almost, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's virtualized and its location is parallel. It's allowed to be.
It's one better than virtual. It's like it can be fuzzy,
Yeah.
like it can be like non-discrete in space too.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that we draft an email that sort of lays out our concepts, like we replace server with this other concept. Point 15, where he says that any service provider can charge any rate.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, okay, yes, you can do that, but then we propose an extension called ambient attribution, where we're saying there is a global rate that is considered global fare. We need that to be efficient because, if you want to charge $1 per page, these transclusions, who's to say how small they are? How do you work out what's a fair proportional charge per transclusion? It's not workable to make it a free market, because you could, but we'd guarantee that it wouldn't take off. If you had it automated, it would run better.
Can I just say I'm starting to get severe psychosomatic reactions to hearing the word market these days.
That's totally fine. I mean, some people went to war over that, so.
I think, okay, so can I just say, why not marry these two concepts? I want to see each of the 17 points as a node in the phone, and I want to start relating things to them. I think that's a fantastic exercise.
Okay, that sounds cool. And then that can be our skeleton, and we'll build up from there.
And I think you can grab the subgraph of Xanadu related things, and you could just send that, a link to that in the email, and say this is how we view it, and it'll be pretty easy for us to tell whether it's
So we basically send him this transclusion thing that's hey, we think we made what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do that. I think
Okay, well, that's good to know that you think it's feasible to do. It sounds like the Dreamcatcher when I read it, but then
you the Dreamcatcher is kind of a thing that, if correctly designed, should kind of glom onto everything, right?
That's the trouble with it, though, right? It's it's a pretty good hammer. Okay, because I need to say this just to make sure that it's not too insane.
Okay.
If this guy endorsed us, that would be better than having Tim Berners-Lee saying that we were building the right thing.
Does he have a following?
He does, but it's extreme. It's a small number of extremists. Tim Berners-Lee won because he had the numbers.
Right.
But this Ted Nelson predated Berners-Lee and claims to have given him many of the ideas. If you take a look at something, they have a list of people who contributed to Project Xanadu, and just trying to find where it was, but the list was insane. It had everybody. It had it, it had God, I'll find it because it was born in Xerox Park. That's where these guys came from.
Yeah, I want to read that list. I mean, it feels like one of those ideas that I think there are a few of them around in the space of computing still that like everyone who's done enough of it can see. They could see the thing, but like it's so hard to just make it happen.
Yeah, everyone knows, but they're like, there's this other thing that kind of just works.
Right. And right now I think there's such a talent pool of people that like that are that way. They can see the thing, but like they're currently working in Web3 because it's like the most decentralized self-sovereign system right now, but it's also like already kind of completely co-opted, right? Like it I think it's kind of rotten to the core in a lot of aspects. um,
Yeah,
those people, that talent, like would probably jump to the right place if the right
absolutely.
place existed.
Absolutely. And I think that at least talking to this guy is essential.
I never, you know what, like I really enjoy talking to you about like strategy and documentation and stuff like that, like almost as much as I like talking about code and digging down into it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like when I'm writing code, like I'm like, I'd love to be doing anything else but this right now.
Okay, here's the link of
Okay.
people. Let me pick a few choice names from the list. Richard Stallman, Alan Kay,
I mean, there's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people, right? And the point is that if we could get an endorsement from Ted, because I honestly think that we've hit Xanadu, it's just that he might need to bend a little bit to our server notion.
Mm-hmm.
We might need to bend a little bit to his ideas because he might change what we think a bit because he's been at this longer. And then if we could start there, like all these, the name Xanadu is so well known that we could definitely get a lot more audience, I guess. And that's valuable, right? Like that's valuable to helping an idea grow. It's like this is a genuine, clean thing that we're trying. This is the most general thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah. The only concern I ever have about that, like, so I'm very much pro. I call it chaos mode, right? When you know that something is strong enough that you could just like stop trying to govern it and like let everybody else just jump in with full force on it and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Like the only problem is that like it's when you flip that switch, it can destroy the thing that you're working on.
I know if it doesn't, it break. But that's the thing that we gotta make it strong enough to handle the greed rush.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to survive the greed rush and convert that greed into growth, positive growth.
Which means trapping the greedy in a bubble somehow and like slowly extracting the like the value from it. Yeah,
because greed is valuable. It's like a fossil fuel. It's dirty. Okay, all right. We'll start with adding those things in. Do you want to start? If you can start using foam and then sort of just have at it with format changes and layouts that you want, because I don't really know. Like I just took a stab at it. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong.
Can you add orphaned points to it?
What's that?
Can you add orphaned points to it, or do they have to all be connected?
Absolutely. That's a placeholder, and that shows up as gray in the graph.
Right. Okay.
You'll see some panels on the left hand or in the sort of the Explorer view of VS Code that show orphans and placeholders. One design or choice I made was to not use tags, and I chose not to use tags because tags cannot have a parent, Whereas I think for us, having a parent to every piece of knowledge is essential. But a tag is like it's an orphan by default. It only points out. So if you want to just have at it and chuck stuff in here, and if you want to add a new format, the most interesting thing you may want to twiddle with is under .foam/templates.
Yeah.
These are the templates that show up when you type Control-Shift-P, create new note from template. And that's where I've specified what.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So you can just tap through and write stuff.
Yeah. Using VS Code snippets.
Huh.
So why don't we try that? Because if you and I get fluent at foam, that's already designing the Dreamcatcher a lot.
Yep.
And if we can figure out a way to approach Ted Nelson and sort of be like, hey man, how's about a star? That's really good for us, I think. So
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right. I better shoot off then. If there's nothing else I can help out or.
No, all good.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to see from the Git commits what I'll endeavor to do from now on is whenever I'm struggling or thinking about a concept, I'll be reasoning about it in the foam graph.
Okay.
And so you'll get to see what I'm thinking about there, right? So right now, my current drive is crash recovery, in particular, pulses that didn't transmit before or weren't fully processed and all that kind of thing. So that's where I'm at. Okay.
Sounds
all
good.
right. Sweet, man. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Enjoy it as always.
Yeah. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.